I'm pretty upbeat and I'm pretty a positive person. I think us landlords are going to win and beat the system at the very end. But I do have to kind of talk about some of the rough things that we're going through, some of the pitfalls that we're going to see right now that if we don't address, we're going to get stuck. And so if some of you will just kind of, I don't want to say go negative, but I just kind of want to go through a little bit where we're at nowadays, how the government is actually working kind of against us, and then what we're going to do to battle that and still find a successful real estate career. So regulation is turning private housing into public housing. Now, what I mean by that is, you have to ask yourself, and yes, we are the landlord, yes, we are in control, but the more regulation that comes in, the more limited that we are here. Here's an example. If you have someone that's not paying you rent right now, go try to evict them, okay? How much do you feel like the person in control or the person who owns the home or the landlord or the housing provider, or whatever you call yourself, how much do you feel in control if you can't even get rid of the person who's not paying you rent? So that's what I mean by regulation is turning private housing into public housing. The reality is the government over the years have gotten rid of public housing. They haven't kept up with it. Affordable housing is going to be our next major issue. And city councils and counties and state, they're all trying to figure out a way to solve this problem. And they're realizing the government is not good at solving these problems. So they're pushing regulation onto us private landlords so that we'll solve the problem for them. But the reality is everything they do is just getting worse and worse and worse. We're not going to solve this for them. Now, let me tell you how I feel. I have 14 properties. If I could fix this whole affordable housing, if I could fix homelessness, if I could fix the drug problem, I would do it in 2 seconds. But I'm a landlord that owns 14 units. I can do what I can do within my 14 places. And so I try to be the best landlord, housing provider, whatever the name is. I try to be that best person. And everyone tells me, oh, you're the rich guy, you're the mean guy, you throw people out and all the bad rap. I'm just in charge of 14. You might be in charge of 1, 5, 10, 20. You might be on the call and have hundreds. But we can only do what we can do in our own little neck of the woods. And here's the reality is, why do I do background checks? Why do I make sure and put the right people in? Yes, I do want to get my mortgage paid, but I also want to protect all of my, what I call business partners or tenants also. I want to make sure that in my 14 little units, we're all winning. There's not one winner and 14 losers. There's 15 winners. There's me and the 14 property owners. So that's kind of how I look at it. So when I hear about how a mean old landlord and all this stuff, I know that in my little circle, I've got a really good thing going. And so if it takes that mental shift for you to realize, hey, I'm just taking care of my own little world and I'm not in the government, I'm not responsible for fixing these issues, and you're not, then I'm not going to feel bad about it anymore. I'm going to stand up proud, hold my head high, and just do my thing. So, so that's what we're going to get now. There's some things going against us. Now, I opened up and I talked about we're really not property managers, we're people managers. And when we deal with people, this federal government comes in and says, hey, we need to be fair and we need to treat everybody the same. And so because we're dealing with people, we're going to start putting all these regulations in place. So I want you to just give you an idea of what we deal with as a screening company. Okay, we're considered a credit reporting agency. We're the same as Experian, TransUnion. We fall under all those rules. And we used to have to worry about a thing called the FCRA, the Federal Credit Reporting Act. It covered all 50 states. And then certain states started making their own rules, and we had to worry about California, for example. We can't go back over 7 years in California. So I can find a sex offender in California 8 years ago, and I can have a client that says, hey, can you do a background for me? And I can't tell them about the person 8 years ago. That is so difficult for us as a company to know we have data that we can't share. And so that's really hard on us right there. And then other states started coming on, and then other counties started making their own rules, and then cities started making their own rules. For example, Seattle said you could no longer do a background check in your tenant screening, period. You can't do it. So someone says they want to rent to you, you rent to them. You can't do a lot of due diligence there. And so what does that do for the people of Seattle? All the investors move to the suburbs, sell all their properties, and start buying homes out in the suburbs, and Seattle loses rental properties. I don't know if that was their goal in the very beginning, but now you're going to have a hard time living in Seattle if you can't buy a home because people investors are leaving in Seattle. Portland is a mess right now, as most of you know. People are leaving Portland in investing market. LA has quite the homeless issue right now. They're having some serious issues. Chicago is now saying, okay, landlords, you can do a credit check first, and then you can do an initial, you can do the initial credit check, and then you have to approve them. And then after you approve them, then you can do a background check. And then if you find some criminal history, you have to scientifically tell them how that background check affects the property and affects the risk. And it's crazy in Chicago. Louisville City Council went as far and said, hey, criminal backgrounds, so any kind of criminal background is a protected class. You can't use it, which is odd because I called Louisville a government and I said, hey, do you guys do a background check to hire people to work for the government? Oh, absolutely. We want to find the best people to work for Louisville. I'm like, but landlords can't use criminal background checks for, to let them move into a place. And they're like, well, yeah, that's the rule. And I say, hey, if you're going to put something in a protected class, then it's protected in housing, it's protected in employment, it's protected everywhere. But they don't see it like that. They're just pushing this stuff on private landlords. And a lot of us private landlords and a lot of associations, are just kind of sitting back and letting this happen. I know National RE is not. I know they're on the forefront of a lot of these places looking, teaming up with attorneys and fighting a lot of these laws. So I'm grateful for RIAs. We have strength in numbers when we fight this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Heather, anything I'm missing out there?
Well, I was just saying yesterday, we kind of keep in touch with a lot of these RIAs and areas that are going through all of these new regulations, and we can't even keep up with it anymore. I mean, just yesterday, I got another email from Chicago. And our attorney used to follow these things, but now there's so many cities doing all of these, trying to jump in and have their own rules that we can't really keep up with it on a day-to-day basis anymore. But now they're throwing rules against, they're going to keep eviction records through 2022. Like, you can't use eviction records against people. So it's like, it's always something new. There's always something coming, so it's just unfortunate. Because I know with my property, I want to get the best person in there because I'm relying on this person to pay my mortgage. So I need to be able to trust them. So it's just rough times for sure.
Another big wave coming across the country right now is make source of income a protected class. And that means it doesn't matter where their income comes. If they have income, then that means they can rent with you. Now, what does that mean? That means in a lot of states like Colorado that just passed it, a landlord can't say whether they want to do business with the government. So they have to take Section 8 housing. So because Section 8 housing, the money's coming from the government, I can't discriminate against where the money's coming. So now I have to do Section 8 in Colorado, which means once a year, the government's going to come in and they're going to do an assessment of my property, and I'm going to have to fill out this paperwork. And so now I can't even say, no, I don't want to do business with the government anymore if I'm in any of those states. I have to do Section 8 housing now. Now, I'm not saying Section 8 housing is bad. I've got a lot of friends that make a ton of money off Section 8 housing. In fact, I've got one friend that left regular housing and went to only Section 8 housing, and he loves it. But each area of the country is a different investment pool. It's a different area. It's a different mindset of people. What works some places doesn't work other places. And so that's just something that an investor has to, want to do. And that is Section 8 housings. For some reason, I'm not there yet. I don't think it's a bad thing. I just don't choose to go down that road. And I don't want to be forced to go down that road either. That's a big problem that I have, is these property rights that are getting thrown against me. So let's move on to the next slide. I want to kind of get out of this negativity, and I want to go.
But you get the point.
Yeah.
It's getting rough.
But tell me how credit bureaus aren't helping us nowadays. Why are credit bureaus getting weak, Heather?
Well, credit bureaus are just really losing their value. I mean, more and more, they don't want negative things reported on credit bureaus. So scores are going up. And, you'll see articles and, news articles, oh, consumer credit scores are on the rise. Yeah, because you're taking the negative stuff off the reports.
Right, exactly.
So that's why the scores are going up.
The behaviors aren't changing. You're just taking the stuff off the reports.
Yeah, you're taking away the bad things that we need to know about. That's the point of that's the point of a criminal history. That's the point of credit. It's a record for a reason.
Right.
I mean, the way I see it.
So
Giving a fair warning.
3 years ago, July now, they took liens, judgments, off, which include evictions, off of the credit bureaus. Mm-hmm. And when we file our evictions around the country, we're usually not putting the social security number. We're usually not putting the date of birth. And so they were putting the wrong evictions on wrong people's files, and they were getting sued. So they finally said, hey, listen, we're not going to deal with data we can't be sure about. So we're not going to put judgments and evictions on credit bureaus anymore. We're going to let collection agencies do it, because then they know the social security, they know the people. We're going to let them vet the people before they put them up on it. So the only way you can get an eviction or a judgment on a credit bureau is actually through a collection agency. Even when we report positive credit with payment, they only want positive payment. We cannot report negative payment.
For rent pay history.
Yeah, for rent pay history. So you see current, and then a blank, current, a blank, and you're like, well, what happened in those blanks? Did they just forget to report, or is that a negative? But it never counts against their score. So people's scores are going up, even though their behaviors are changing. Records are getting more and more difficult to access. Guys, if we go in and we do the 5 boroughs of New York, they want $99 to search one name. If we want to go in and search 2 people, it's 99 times 2. So if we have maybe a gal that just got married that has, our maiden name and her married name, there's a big fee. And so a lot of courts now are throwing fees at us to get us to quit searching them. They're saying, oh no, it's open public record law. That's great. It's just so expensive. Or they're making it a week to get the information back. And there's no landlord in this country that wants to wait a week before they have to make a decision to rent out a property. So they're really playing some games with us. So we battle and battle. So everything we're talking about right now, we've cleared up. We do it in a little different way. We still get evictions. We still get judgments. We still get liens. We just don't count on the credit bureaus to do it. But a lot of other screening companies do count on the credit bureau for that information. They don't have the resources that we have. And so if you're counting on some other screening company that's 10, 15, 20 bucks online, get you back an instant report, you're not getting evictions, judgments, and liens. So I just want to let you know that.
Yeah, you can't get that stuff like in an instant type database. Yeah. That takes research, and they're making it more difficult, but so that's just how it is right now. So we have to adjust as they throw these rules at us.
So one thing that Rent Perfect does is we take 4 to 6 hours where you're assigned your very own private investigator, and they're researching your file for you. They're going out and getting additional data. That's the time, that 4 to 6 business hours is the time we're taking to go through what we're talking about. Okay. So if anybody has to move in within the day, then you probably don't want that person anyway. That's a big red flag. So we're not saying Rent Perfect going to take a long amount of time. We take a very short amount of time, but we still are not an instant product. We still take a little bit of time before we give you back the final report. But instantly, Heather, what do we give them instantly?
Well, instantly, you're going to get the credit bureau. We do give you an instant, it's an instant criminal check. It's what our competitors give. So we'd like you to see up front, okay, this is what's in the database, but hang on, don't make your decision yet. And then we give another valuable report. It's called an address history. It's based off their social, and you'll get like the list of names and addresses they've gone by. And there's several other things on this valuable report, but kind of helps, check who's using this social. You can look at their ID, make sure you know who they are. You get an application that they fill out. So we do get you some stuff right away, but that meaty investigation that's really comprehensive just takes a little bit of time.
Right. With that application, you get a copy of their driver's license. You get their paycheck stubs with it. So it kind of gives you all, we make the tenant give you all the data up front so you can make a quick decision. Once that 4 to 6 hours up, you're making a decision right away. So you do get some instant stuff, but we're talking about the whole final product. So I don't know why I got off on that right now. Let's continue on our education part of it. I just want to let you know that even though it's hard to get these records, the government is not helping us, we're still getting them. So I used to always say, and Heather used to hear me always say, hey guys, we got to scream like we can evict. I never really knew in a million years, I never thought that literally I couldn't evict somebody. It blows me away that a moratorium comes in and completely stops us. So the reality is we do have to screen like we can't evict because we can't evict currently. And we need to keep that mindset, because once the government has found a way to stop evictions, the next catastrophe, the next pandemic, the next anything, they're going to go to protecting people in their homes again, because that's what they feel is a big responsibility of the government, is to protect the vulnerable population. And they feel like the vulnerable population is in rentals. So when they go to fix any problem, they're going to start addressing, okay, are we keeping people in their homes? So we saw the first ever eviction moratorium. I don't think it will be the last eviction moratorium. So we need to make sure we even manage our properties in such a way. You know, Heather, who didn't get hurt by the eviction moratorium? Who didn't get hurt by it?
Well, people with the right tenants in there. I
Right,
mean,
right. There are people on this call that said, oh, the eviction moratorium never hurt me. I got my rent all the way through it. It never even fazed them. Now, I'm sure they're mad about it and they're upset that the federal government's getting in our business. But there's other people on this call that are sitting there with someone right now in their house, kind of just giving them the nod, saying there's nothing you can do about it. I'm living in your property and I don't have to pay you rent.
yeah. Well, and that's the unfortunate reality too, is there are people taking advantage of this.
Right.
You know, they're getting unemployment, they're getting, you know, they're not making an effort to pay. There are others out there that were the right tenants. Maybe they did lose their job. It was a huge industry that was hurt very severely, but they made it happen. They got on payment plans. They went to their church, rental assistance, family, you know, got this paid. But then there are unfortunately tenants in there that are just taking advantage of this system, and that's what we're talking about mainly right now.
Right, absolutely. You know, I had tenants that lost their job that worked in the restaurant, but you're right, they went to unemployment, they went to their church, went to their family, and they still got me checks. One of them even just worked with me and got me 2 checks a month, and I just worked with them. But they stayed in communication with me and they knew how important it was to get the rent paid. When the internet's telling them, oh, you don't have to pay rent anymore. Okay, great. I'll go buy a big screen TV. I'll go do this. I'll go do that, whatever it is. You know, we want to make sure that we find that responsible tenant that if the next eviction moratorium comes, it's not going to phase us. Let's push all of those guys out to non-REIA landlords who aren't real educated, and we'll push those off. There's plenty of roofs out there that will house them. But let's learn how to find the best ones possible. So let's roll the next slide. Now, one of the big things we've really been pushing, and I think has really come out of this whole pandemic, and that is a lot of our clients in the past never had a rental criteria. They kind of just took in applications and they kind of decided whether they liked them, they didn't like them. And they didn't really have a detailed criteria that they went through and said, okay, do they pass my credit requirements? Do they pass my criminal requirements? Do they pass my residential verification requirements? Do they pass the income requirements? And I think really what we've done in the last year, Heather, we've been on just a ton of these Zoom calls talking about if you don't have a detailed rental criteria, we want you to get one. And if you learn anything from today is we're going to take you through a detailed rental criteria. And then if you email info@rentperfect, that's info@rentperfect, we'll send you a detailed one. Now, we're not going to send you one to use. It's because each rental criteria is really, you know, for each property. You could have multiple rental criteria for each property. It all depends, you know, where your properties are. And so we're just going to send you a sample, take our sample, adjust it. The neat thing is within RentPerfect, you build a rental criteria within RentPerfect, and the report we're going to send you is something that was built within probably a minute within the Rent Perfect system. We didn't go to a Word document and fill it out. It's just automatically helps you do it within inside the Rent Perfect system. So you need a detailed rental criteria. That is the paper that if Fair Housing calls you and says, why didn't you rent to this person? You don't say, oh, I had a better offer, I didn't like them. You say, oh, because on my rental criteria, they did not pass the rent to income ratio. They didn't make enough money, so they didn't qualify. Fair Housing will then say, oh, okay, you're treating everybody the same. You're taking them down that same criteria list. And we've had people on calls that say, I was in the middle of a lawsuit or getting filed a complaint on, and my rental criteria absolutely saved me. So we want you to have a rental criteria.
Yeah, there are shoppers too. People
Yes.
that will come and they will apply and they're going to try and catch you with this. And so, I mean, a rental criteria, we realize, oh my gosh, a lot of people are not even using a rental criteria. They're just kind of having people apply, looking it over, seeing what they feel, what they think. Oh, this is my cousin's friend, and we realized that it was harming people, especially once this moratorium came and they didn't exactly have the right person. So the rental criteria is twofold, really. I mean, it will protect you against fair housing lawsuits and fair housing fines, but it's going to help you get the right person, the qualified person for your property, so that they're not underqualified, so that you make sure they meet your checklist, so that you can rest easy knowing, okay, I've done everything that I can do. So now I know, I mean, everyone's a risk that you're going to rent to, but if you do everything on your part to vet them, then you can feel good giving them the keys, knowing, okay, this is the best I could do. So,
And Heather, not to get off topic, but I just came from Florida yesterday. I spent the last week there, and I've been actually sued by these guys, and I saw billboards and I saw them all over the TV, but Morgan and Morgan, we sue the bully, right? And there are these attorneys that are looking for class action lawsuits. They're looking for anything at all to sue somebody where they didn't follow an exact regulation, an exact, compliance issue. No more than in Florida, and some of you might be shaking your heads, Morgan and Morgan will be, they're always constantly, advertising to people. If you feel you've been wronged, come see us. We'll get you money. We're fighting for you. And there are shoppers out there, and there are people that did it to one landlord. They're going to do it to 2, 3, 4. They make a living off it. So that's a great point. Anyways, in our rental criteria, we're going to talk about evictions, judgments, liens. How do we feel about those? Collections, credit scores, criminal records, income, rental history. You're going to talk about smoking and your pet policies and even more. So I think there's no better way to go through a detailed criteria than just to show you our detailed criteria and go through it real quick. It's 2 pages. So let's look at the first page.
Yeah, just to preface too. So, I mean, we've talked about all this regulation coming, cities, federal, city, states. So that's the other important part of your rental criteria is you need to know where your property, obviously, where your property is. So you need to keep up with those regulations that are going on. RIAs are great for that. So I know you're in Florida, but I don't know where all of your properties are. So you need to keep up with that, just so you make sure your rental criteria isn't violating any of those rules. And that's how you can also protect yourself. Your rental criteria can go in line with those laws so that you're not going to, violate something and get a shopper suing you. So.
Well, it's a great point because in St. Paul, Minnesota, they just said you can only go back 3 years misdemeanor, 5 years felony. In the criteria we're going to show you right now, we go 5 years misdemeanor, 7 years felony. If you're in St. Paul, Minnesota right now, you can't even use this criteria. You have to adjust those numbers. So we're not attorneys. We're not telling you what to put in your criteria. We're just giving you a sample of what you can do and how you can do it. Just kind of helps you get started. So I want to start underneath criminal criteria. I'm not going to read this whole thing. You guys can request it and read it, but our attorneys have gone through this and every little word is there for a reason. Let me give you an example of this. Any felony relating to or regarding a person, property, or drug-related criminal activity in the past 7 years from the date of the investigative report to the date of the conviction. Now, if that was a period and it would stop there, we would leave a big hole there, and I'll explain that in a second. But we go on to say, release from custody or parole, whichever occurs last, or in the case of any form of a diversion program, 7 years from the date of the offense to the date of the investigative report. All
That's
right.
a lot of words.
That's a lot of words. It's a
They're
lot of
important
legal,
words.
and people are like, what? What did you say? Let me just give you what it says. It pretty much says, if I have a guy come apply with me and I do a 7-year background on him, and I only go back 7 years, and I find that, well, let me say I go back 10 years and I find that 8 years ago he was sentenced to prison and he got out of prison yesterday. If I stop and I just say 7 years from the date of conviction, he's approved at my property. So we put in, from release of custody or parole. So we want to know 7 years from when they're back into society. We need to give them time to reoffend, and we need to see how they're going to run their lives. There are people who got in trouble and learned their lesson. We're not saying anybody with a criminal history in the past is not a good tenant or business partner. They could be a great tenant or business partner, but we want to see that person who, if they got in trouble, they learned their lesson. We just don't want the person who constantly is that repeat criminal, right? They get out of prison, they do another crime, they go back to prison, they violate their parole, they violate probation,
They bring over their criminal friends, the police are always called, the neighbors are complaining, and it's a big chore for you managing these type of people is what it comes down to.
Absolutely. So in this example, we say 7-year felony, and then we go down to the misdemeanor and we say pretty much the same question. We say a 5-year misdemeanor. Once again, I'm not saying that's your numbers. I'm just telling you what this
Is a sample.
is. Felony, usually for those on the line that don't know, usually you go to prison for over a year. Misdemeanor is some kind of shoplifting, assault, stuff like that. But there are misdemeanors that would concern me. If you're beating up people, if you have a hot temper, if you have a lot of domestic violence, and they're misdemeanors, that still concerns me as a landlord, that I'm going to have issues. Because remember, I started this whole presentation with, we're managing people and not property. It's easy to call the air conditioning guy to fix the air conditioning. It's easy to call a painter or a drywall guy. That's easy. Deal with the police that's calling you at 7 o'clock at night saying, hey, there's some custody battles, there's some broken windows, someone kicked down a door, they're yelling at each other, one of the tenants is going off to jail, we're going to hold him for a while, he's not going to be able to go to work, good luck getting your rent. I mean, dealing with people is a lot different than managing property. So we want to make sure that we find those people that show us the right behavior up front. If you don't have any kind of assault or behavioral issue, for the last 7 years, there's a good chance you probably won't in the next, 7 years while you're renting from me. Could happen, but we're just going with the odds here.
Yeah, and that's why you have this rental criteria, because you can fall back on it. Oh, this is the rental criteria. You have this decided ahead of time. You've gone over it with your attorney, with a mentor in your RIA, whoever, and you can fall back on this. Oh, for fair housing, this is my criteria for my property. Declining someone is not fun. So no one really wants to do that, but you're really just saving yourself a headache. Once you have your rental criteria in place, it's there to just protect you on many facets. So
some of you might be thinking, David, why 7 years? I want to go 15 years on a felony. I don't like felonies. I want to go ever. I don't want anybody who's ever had a felony. Well, Fair Housing came out about 5 years ago and said, 7 years is the max you're going to go. If you go over 7 years, you have to scientifically prove why they're a risk to you. Because we have a study that says, if someone has committed a crime and they haven't committed another crime in 7 years, that their risk is about the same as someone who's never committed a crime. So they have this study that they're standing behind saying, hey, this study is good enough for us to say you can't go over 7 years, or you have to show us a study that, that says this study is wrong. Heather, when was that study done?
Like a zillion years ago. They found the case, a study that they wanted from like 1915 or something. When is it from? I don't remember.
Out of the University of Minnesota to get this study, but that's right. they found their desired results first, and then they came all the way back and found the study that would give them the right to do that. So if you want a problem, go over 7 years. I say, listen, if we get you the right data and someone's clean for 7 years, I think they're going to be a good business partner for you. I don't think we need to go 15 years back. There's only one circumstance we're going to go back over 7 years for you, and that is the next bullet point down is any sexual related crime. So if they're a sex offender, there is plenty of data that shows that they'll never fully recover, and they're on a lifetime probation. So we will go all the way back in our backgrounds to when they're 18 years old, looking for those sex offenders and keep them from living in your property. But other than that, you don't want to put the word ever in there. You don't want to go over 7 years. Also, people ask us a lot about open and active cases. So they haven't been convicted yet. So you'll have someone say, well, I haven't been convicted of that, but it's open. So we put something in that says any pending looming legal action found which could result in a disqualifying felony or misdemeanor conviction is set forth above. We can use open cases. We can use active warrants. You don't want to rent to people with open cases and active warrants. Now, active warrants, okay, the police are going to be tracking these guys, and they're going to see that they've inquired to your property when we run the credit. They're going to know, and they're going to contact either you as a landlord or us and saying, hey, did that person move in? We're looking for them. So how do you feel as a landlord? You move someone in, the police come over, grab them, and haul them off to jail. That's not the beginning of a great relationship. So active warrants.
I've had it happen. I've had clients call, oh no, was this on? They'll look at the report. They did have the warrant. Why did, my agent rent to them? Oh, they didn't think it was a big deal. Now you're stuck with all their stuff, and there's rules for that. So now you have a big chore on your hands. So, I mean, warrants are a big deal, especially felony warrants, things like that, that they could get extradited. They could, be in jail for a while, and they're not paying you rent while they're in jail because they don't care about that when they're in jail.
Right. So a couple things on the criminal side of things. I'll have people say, oh, come on, Dave, it was just shoplifting. It's not, they stole a 55-cent candy bar. They did, big deal. They could still move into my place. And you can have your opinion, and that's great if that's, what you want your criteria to be. I say the person who has to steal a 55-cent candy bar really concerns me. That is taking of someone else's property. So what makes me think that you're not going to take, maybe my washer and dryer I let you use, my refrigerator, maybe some light fixtures or some, door handles, or what makes me think you're not going to steal 55 cents from me? I don't want that person in my property. So to me, any kind of theft, no matter the price, it bothers me. It bothers me a lot because it shows me a behavior. I don't care about the 55 cents. I don't care about the Milky Way. I don't care about, I care about the behavior. What makes a person take something that isn't there? That's not the person that $120,000 tenant is going to stay for 5 years. That's someone who's just taking something right now that I need and not really thinking about what I'm doing. So, so even little misdemeanors for me personally, they matter. They matter to me.
Dave, I always have felt the same about credit. People will, I go over credit reports with people. Just sometimes a credit report can be confusing the first time you're looking at it. There's a lot of data on there, and they'll say, oh, well, that's just, a $50 collection. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's just a $50 collection. I mean, that's one way to look at it. But another way to look at it is, that's $50. Like, you let a $50, bill go to collections. Why didn't you just pay your $50 bill, especially utility bills, like the $100 utility bills that maybe they're just stubborn. I don't know, but those are the bigger red flags to me personally. Once again, you know your property, your applicants, you're going to make your own criteria, but these are just important things to think about. I mean, when I see bigger things, bad things can happen, big car accidents, divorce, nasty divorces that are unexpected, deaths. Things can make big things, happen on credit reports, but the little things bother me a little bit more. Just pay your small collection. So, I mean, just some things to consider when you're making your own criteria.
Okay, perfect. So let's roll down to evictions real quick. I don't allow any open evictions in mine. I feel like, here's what I feel like. When I go and I meet somebody out at the property and they start telling me how bad their current landlord is and how they're trying to get out of the property and they don't fix anything and they don't return phone calls and they hang up on me and they tell me all this stuff about their current landlord, I'm full on red flagging right now going, I'm just going to be the next guy they're complaining about. Because Heather, I don't think I'm anything special. I'm just a landlord out there with my 14 little properties trying to do, I don't think I'm better than the landlord that they're moving from. So what makes me think I'm super landlord and they're never going to have a problem with me? I'm noticing a victim mentality, and I'm noticing that if they left somebody with an open eviction, they're going to leave me with an open eviction. There's nothing special about me. And if I rent to them and that open eviction never hurt them, then they're going to say, oh, an open eviction doesn't hurt you, find your next place. I'm going to leave and save my money for the next deposit and not pay rent, skip out overnight. And so any kind of open eviction is absolutely a no-go for me. I have to protect our fellow landlords. We're all in this together. And if you owe another landlord money, then you're not renting from me. In addition, you owe a utility company money. You're going to have to pay them that collection fee before they turn utilities on in my property. So that the utility collections are pretty important too, because they need to be cleaned up.
Exactly.
So also, I talked about collection companies, right? And a lot of collection companies putting on judgments and thing on credit. If there's anything that's an unpaid rental judgment, I treat it the same as an eviction. If you owe a landlord money, you need to go get that paid. You need to go get that cleared up. You need to come back and show me that it was a paid rental collection. In this one, I have underneath credit criteria, any paid rental collection in the past 5 years. This is a pretty high property in a high area of town right here. I'm looking for probably that 675, 700 score plus at this property. But if I had some place in a least desirable part of town, I don't know how to say that, maybe not least desirable, but just kind of a lower rent, lower part of town, then I would take that criteria and shoot that down to maybe 1 year or 2 years.
Well, yeah, because you don't want to deny everyone. Like you want to get a renter in there. And, sometimes people will say that. I've heard people say that to you, David. They'll say, well, just, I know my applicants and it just, none of this would apply. Well, you need to make it apply. Like this is just a sample. You don't want to deny everyone. Of course you don't want to deny everyone. Then what would be the point? But you want to get the best of your pool of applicants. So if you're unsure of that, do a little research. If you're in a RIA, talk to other people, see if they have properties in the area. You absolutely don't want to deny everyone. You don't want to be too strict, but you want to be strict enough so that you can get the best of your pool of applicants.
Yeah, I love that, because if your criteria is too high, you're denying everybody, which does you no good. You need to get your property filled. But if your criteria is too low, you're renting to the very first person who's applying.
Yeah, and you don't want that. And if you don't have the right criteria, you might be violating some rule in your area. So the criteria is just so important to do some research, do some due diligence, and get your criteria in that sweet spot so that you can feel good about it.
And I adjust my criteria a couple times a year. I go through it, I look at it, I look at who comes in. If I deny someone for not meeting the criteria, I have to ask myself, is this the average person that's applying? Am I looking, do I have my criteria too high? This is a living, breathing document. I wouldn't be changing it on the fly like all the time, but I definitely would change this criteria based on your properties once or twice a year, especially in a year like a pandemic or a year that's just an anomaly. I would make sure and know that this is kind of a fluid document. It can change and move, or you might add something to it that you didn't think about. You're like, oh, you know what? My property has a storage unit on it and the storage unit isn't available to the tenant. So I'm going to put in my criteria, the storage unit out back is not available to you, or whatever your criteria is, you put it on here because it won't hurt you. This should be a longer list than
let's go over the second page because that kind of covers.
Well, let's talk about credit real quick before we move on real quick.
Okay, jumping again.
So people understand credit. So 700 and above is usually what we say someone can buy a home that's really good credit. Your average Renter went from 625 to 649. We talked about raising the credit score. So your average renter right now is about 649 out there that's looking to rent. Underneath 550, you're starting to see them hardly paying anybody. And if you're below 500, they've never paid anybody at all. And so just kind of, you need to know how that kind of works and about what the credit is. We always say, hey, it's easy to approve somebody on credit and it's easy to deny someone on credit. That's just black and white. Boom, your credit score is 701, you're approved. Your credit score is 549, you're denied. The problem, the hard part about credit is that conditional. It's that I'm not gonna make a decision whether you're approved or denied based on your credit alone, but I'm gonna open it up and I'm gonna look at everything else, the job, how much do you make? What is pulling your credit down? Is it medical? Is it student loan? Is it, and then that conditional part, you'll then say they're approved or declined based on all of the circumstances. But that 550 in this example to 699, that's kind of open for discussion based on other factors. That's the hard part of credit. The approved and the denied part, simple.
Totally. Yep. So are we ready for the next page?
Yes.
So this is kind of continuing on. It was a little long to put on one page. But we have this tenant advisory. So what's the tenant advisory, Dave?
Well, you know, what we want to do is we don't want to be seen as the bad landlord. So if we ever have to go to court, and that's, you know, you think to yourself, when do you need your lease and when do you need your criteria? It's always when there's a negative situation. When you rent to the right person, this is never coming up. You're never pulling out your lease again. There's nothing to discuss if things go well. But when things go wrong, you need documentation to be on your side. And so, Heather, with this whole, you know, eviction moratorium and what's going on, we've almost become small, like, remember in 2007, 2008, mortgages were super easy to get. And then all of a sudden, these underwriters came in and said, you need much more money down. You need to qualify. Your files went from being like super small to an inch thick.
Yeah, you'll tell me about how you would like get a mortgage on like stated income and stuff like that. And I've been getting mortgages. I'm like, it's like this huge homework assignment. And I'm like digging back through my history and old tax returns and my file's this big. So that's tenant screening is going through the same thing right now.
When I go to close a loan for a rental property, I'm signing so much papers. I don't read anything because I got to get through signing all these papers, and all these papers are put in there to protect you as a consumer from the government. And yet, because there's so many papers, we don't read any of them. But I want judges to know when they look at me that I'm also helping the tenant, you know, do as good a deal as they can do. I know I'm not responsible for it. Some people are shaking their head and saying, why are we responsible for this? But if I can at least put on a criteria, review the residential lease prior to signing it. I'm telling the tenant, listen, review it before you sign it. I can't make your eyeballs look at it, and I can't make you repeat it to me, and I'm not going to make you read it to me. But this is one thing that I'm telling a judge, I'm one of the good guys. I told them they needed to read the lease before they signed it, because they're going to be in court going, Your Honor, I didn't know about that. Look, this lease is, 5 pages long or 6 pages long. And the big bad landlord's just, using this against me, and I didn't read it. So I like these advisories because I'm telling the judge, I gave this to them and I told them to do this. Review the residential lease owner's property disclosure forms. Okay, read the lead paint disclosure if your property is before 1976. If this property is in an HOA, the tenant should review the CC&Rs. Okay, I'm telling you to do this stuff, so when you tell me that I get at least a HOA violation, I didn't know about that. I told you and I gave you the CC&Rs. Also, the move-in checklist, I tell them, listen, we need to go through a move-in checklist. Now, Rent Perfect has a total move-in procedure that they do by their phone. They take pictures. It saves all the information in the file. It's a great move-in. But I'm telling them that you need to go around the property and you need to look at it, because in 2, 3, 4 years when you move out and I notice there's a hole in the wall, you need to prove to me the hole in the wall was there when you moved in. So go around and make sure that you look at the property. And then here I reiterate, I don't accept pets, or if I accept pets, you know, I only accept them at 15 pounds or less, or whatever you do. And then I also reiterate, no smoking allowed. Then in the Rent Perfect platform, you have this whole open box. This is where you can completely and totally customize anything you want. Talk about rental history, income, credit check, criminal background check, anything you want, you can put into this box. Now here's the key, Heather. The key to using this rental criteria the right way is when you are showing the property, to give this criteria to that person, whether you hand it to them, a piece of paper, or you send them a rental invite from Rent Perfect, they get this rental criteria before they apply. Okay?
So important.
We always want to give this to them before they apply. This is what you're required to do to live here. If there's something on here that you see you can't pass, don't apply. And my landlord's on this call, you're not losing a person, you're losing a problem. I promise you. You don't want to onboard somebody and get to the very end and be a couple days into it with your hopes up that you found your new business partner, just to find out that they have a severe criminal history 2 years ago that they lied about on their application, and they still continue to apply with you. This has to be given out first. If you're not using Rent Perfect, I would get it initialed and I would put it in your file. If you are using Rent Perfect, by them responding to the email and going to apply shows me that they got the criteria, and I have proof of it electronically in the Rent Perfect system. So this is very important, not only to have a criteria, but how do you use a criteria? This will keep you out of trouble, and this will help you find your next $120,000 business partner, I promise.
Yep, absolutely. So with Rent Perfect, when someone wants to apply, you just get their email address, you can get their cell phone number, and you just log into your Rent Perfect app or account, enter that email and phone number, hit send. They get an email or a text saying, hey, you've been invited to apply, and it sends the rental criteria that you've customized. So you're not typing all this out. You're going through a little wizard and putting in some data. This property related additional criteria box, that is like a copy paste type deal where you can put any additional criteria of your own. So you can get that, solidified, saved, and then automatically share that with them. Or you can print this out if you don't use Rent Perfect. And like David said, have them initial it, give it out, with the application so that you can say, hey, I let you know the criteria before applying. A lot of states are requiring this right now. So check where your property is especially, but this is just going to protect you. It's going to protect you from fair housing shoppers. It's going to protect you to help you get the right person in there. So this is the biggest thing from this presentation today is you need a rental criteria. Even if your rental criteria is 1 year felony, and we have clients that have 1 year felony, they know their property, that's the type of strategy they have. So no matter what your strategy, no matter what your criteria, you need a criteria.
We have clients that their whole strategy is not even to make money. It is to help people from prison get housing. And they use us to do the backgrounds to make sure there's not more than what they're being told in their program. And so we don't care on our side what your criteria is as far as Rent Perfect goes. You're the owner, you have your strategies, you know what you're trying to do. We just try to educate you, and we will take a phone call at any point to say, hey, what do you guys feel about this? This is my strategy. This is what I'm looking for. This is the normal person who would apply in this neighborhood. We will completely help you get the right criteria for your property and for your strategy. So let me give you some statistics here real quick. 18% of people who apply with Rent Perfect after they get the criteria, after they fill out the application, have a criminal history within the last 7 years. 18%, so 1 in 6, still have a criminal history, even though most of the times they come through and they say they don't. A lot of people say, well, who are you? Like, what kind of people are you finding out there? We find just as many people who are using false identity as we do people who have a criminal history. And what's happening there is when people are told, no, you can't live there, no, you can't live there, and they keep getting denied a rental, they realize that they have to change something. They have to change their social security number by a digit. They have to change their date of birth, maybe the spelling of their name, maybe they go by the nickname. So we do at Rent Perfect, the first thing we do before we even do a full background is we make sure we know who the person is standing in front of you. We get a copy of their ID our investigators looking at. They've gone through 4 out-of-pocket questions that talk to them a little bit about only information that they would know. So what street did they live on? Where did they grow up at? What company they work at? What, you've probably seen those at the bank. So they go through this identity thing, and then we look at the ID and verify who they are. That is so important. I think one of the main things our competitors miss is they wait for, or they put the burden of the identity on the landlord. Get the ID, and a lot of times we're moving so fast as we're showing the property, or we're taking a phone call later saying, I'll take it. We really don't do a good job making sure we know who the person applying even is. And that's somewhere that's something that Rent Perfect really excels in and really can help you protect yourself to make sure that the right person is who they say they are. Now, we had a circumstance about a month ago where we had a lady come in from Denver, Colorado, and she sent us a copy of her ID. And as we're doing our research, we find that this girl is living at 20 locations at the same time, and which is absolutely impossible, the amount of inquiries that this one name is getting in so many different areas. So we called the police and we said, hey, we believe we have someone using identity theft. They contacted our client, said, hey, meet him out at the property, show him the property again. And they nailed him for, identity theft. And the police actually knew about this name and knew actually that somebody was constantly selling this girl's identity. And I think the girl was like out of Michigan, that they were selling her ID and her profile to people who couldn't apply or get approved on their own because they'd ruined their own credit or their own criminal history. And so identity is huge, as we're going through and finding that next business partner of ours.
Yeah, so I could tell, and I'm sure David could, we could both tell you probably stories. We could just sit here around the campfire and share our stories. But I'm going to share one from just recently. At the bottom of this criteria sheet, first I want to point out, it says note at the bottom. It says if fraud or identification issues are detected or raised by the totality of the application, and especially, this is such lawyery talk, but it's there to protect you. Basically, it's like if there's fraud, you're denied, which most applications have that I've seen, but it's great to add to your rental criteria. So at Rent Perfect, we're the support for applicants filling out the applications. So we'll talk to applicants, quite a bit. They'll call in, especially if they need another attempt at their identity questions. David talked about, they answer 4 questions, out-of-pocket questions to complete their order. They upload their ID. So, sometimes people need another attempt. That's normal. That happens. Some of the questions are off the wall. So they'll call us and we'll work with them to get through it. So yes, I was helping with some phone calls last week and some guy had failed. So he called in and, I was going to look him up in the system. I'm like, okay, so yeah, I just need the last 4 of your social. And he was like, oh, and it's just like dead silence on the other end. And I'm like, yeah, the last 4 of your social. He's like, oh, my social security card's in my car. And I thought it was a little weird, but I'm like, maybe I didn't even know who it was yet. I'm like, he could be 18. He hasn't used his social yet, whatever. Didn't think much of it. So I thought I'd help him out. Okay, well, yeah, what's your date of birth? Dead silence again. Dead silence again. Okay, you don't know, you don't know the last 4 of your social, you don't know your date of birth. So now I think it's really weird, but honestly, I'm not going to get super into it at that point. Like that's not, totally my job. I end up talking to the landlord or the owner about an hour later, and I'm like, hey, So I was just wondering, have you seen this guy in person? Like, because sometimes people will apply from out of state. Long story short, he's like, I haven't even had a chance to look at the actual application yet, which is where the uploaded ID is. He takes one look at it and he's like, that is not him. So he had uploaded, someone else's ID. He didn't, he's using someone else's social. He didn't know the date of birth. So it will help the landlord or the owner, the agent get there themselves. So he's looking, he's like, oh, I'm so glad that I had this phone call with you. I hadn't even gotten around to looking at the ID yet. That's not him. He's given the wrong, ID. And this happens, people are uploading IDs. A huge one is their siblings' ID. So maybe a brother has gone to prison, so his other brother is going to let him use, the ID. So, it's so important. Check those ID. He was protected, so right away he knew he was going to send that adverse action denial letter. Fraud, that's not you. And so, I could tell you stories like that nonstop, but it happens, and people think they're clever.
But in this musical chairs game I talk about in the next 3 months, Heather, how many people are going to get told no because of maybe an eviction record, or maybe the rental verification when they call the landlord? They're going to lie about all that information, because I can't have you calling my old landlord, because then you're not going to rent to me. I can't have you looking at the court records in Florida or wherever your rentals are, because you're going to find that I didn't pay rent and was evicted. And so that's when they're going to start changing all kinds of information. You talked about that address history report. I love it when I look at my applications, and all of a sudden on the address history report, I see an address they've been using for 3 years, yet it's not on their application, right? And then I ask them, well, tell me about this address right here. Well, that silence that you got from the ID, and they would, that was a friend's house. They do not want you digging too deep into their history if they've got something to hide. We give you the tools to catch them. That's the fun thing is to help the landlord find the $120,000 renter. That's the fun thing. That's what we're here for. But we spend a lot of time on finding that tenant who's going to cost you $5,000 if you let them move in, right? So do you want to gain 120,000, or do you want to do a turn and it cost you 5,000 because you moved in the wrong people? Right. Now, we just did a podcast. I just kind of want to bring this up. I haven't talked about this in any other Zoom, but lately I've been putting in this is totally switching gears on you guys. So we're going to take questions after this point, and then we're going to move on and take some questions and move on a little bit more down the road. But I think that most people, when they have a property, they put it on Zillow nowadays. Zillow seems to be the place to go. And you remember when Craigslist used to be like the popular thing to sell stuff, and you go to Craigslist, and now you say to people, yeah, I won't use Craigslist because it's just too wild, wild west. I feel like Zillow has kind of gotten the wild, wild west. When I put my last ad on there about 3 weeks ago, I think I got like 35 people who wanted to view the property. Now, I don't accept applications off of Zillow. In fact, I would tell everybody here, I know I'm kind of competing with Zillow right now, but I wouldn't take applications off of Zillow, because when you open up an application, you're actually inviting somebody to apply. And the more you look at it, the more they're applying, the more you're going to have to give them an adverse action letter when you say no. I don't want people applying with me until I invite them to apply with me. And Zillow right now is allowing people to pay $30, and they can apply as many landlords as they want for $30 for the next 30 days. But I'm not looking for the tenant who's applying at 10 different places. I've made phone calls and I said, hey, I'm David, I have the property. Now, which property was that? Which one's yours? It tells me that they've applied at a lot of different places, right? So I've been putting a code word in my Zillow ads in the very last line of the paragraph. This last one was actually a short-term rental. So I said, I will not respond to any showing if you do not address that this is a short-term rental available June 1st through December 31st of this year. And so all of a sudden I get these 35. I want to see a showing. I want to see a showing. I want to see a showing. I'm looking for 2 years. they didn't even read my ad. So the lady that I ended up showing it to said, I understand that this is a short-term rental available from June 1st to December 31st. This actually works perfect for me. I'm moving here from Virginia and looking for a short-term rental so I can find a place to buy in the future. Now, for that particular short-term rental, then I didn't waste my time showing my property to a lot of people. I went ahead and contacted her, showed it to her. It worked for her. She knew it worked for her, and I knew she loved the property, and I didn't waste a lot of time, and I rented to her. But if on my long terms, I might put something like, this property is available June 1st, because I've showed to many people and they've said, oh, well, we're looking to move in July. We're looking to move in August. No, my property is available June 1st. So I might write a code word. I understand that this property is available June 1st. I understand that there's no smoking in this property. I will not respond if you do not say, I understand that there are no pets allowed in this property. I'm putting these code words into Zillow right now because I want to make sure that I'm weeding out all of these applications that I'm getting that's wasting my time. My time is valuable. So we just did a podcast on that. If you want to listen to that over on YouTube, look at Rent Perfect. But it's kind of a way that I'm going nowadays because I believe that Zillow is really turning into this crazy platform where housing is limited right now. People are having a hard time getting housing. And so everyone's applying everywhere. And I look at it like this, Heather. If you're just looking for a house, then go find someone else's house. I want someone who's looking for my house. You're going to fall in love with my house because then that again goes to the $120,000 tenant who's going to be there for 5 years, right? They're going to read everything. They're going to get to that bottom paragraph. They're going to read that. That means when I give them a lease, when I give them a criteria, they're going to read all that, and I'm going to find a great business partner. So use a code word. That's kind of the most recent thing that we're teaching and training right now as we get ready for this big musical chairs that's about to happen.
Yeah, share your criteria and use a code word in your listings. I love it.
Totally.
Great.
So let's take some questions.
Do we have any questions? I can't see questions.
I know that I have some questions because I've just been absolutely blown away. Sorry, my camera's there. So far, I have one question. I'm really curious to know, David, if you could tell yourself something when you first started out, what would be the biggest tip to help us, like just starting out? Like I'm very interested in getting rental property. I have family members who have rental property, so just curious.
So when I first started out, I was in my 20s. I got into this. I owned an eviction company, and I built the biggest eviction company in Arizona. And I started realizing that I was evicting the same people. This is before the internet. And then a lot of my clients said, hey, Dave, you have a huge eviction database and you're a private investigator. Can you get us a credit bureau and search them through your eviction database? And that's what's kind of started me into the tenant screening world. And that's what started me realizing, hey, the guys that I'm evicting have records. The guys that I never evict don't have records. And so I started cluing in on the success of a landlord is not the property. The property doesn't make you money. Go buy a property and let it sit there empty and tell me how much money it makes you. The property doesn't make you the money. The people who live in the property are the ones who take care of your asset and make you money. And so I soon learned that, and I'm grateful I did from the very beginning, that I was kind of in this eviction background check world, that I realized the success of your tenants is your success. If your tenant fails, you fail. And so, yeah, go to your RIAs, talk to your wholesalers, look for assets and do all this stuff. But when it's really time to get serious, look at the people you're going to align yourself with. It's almost like you become who you hang out with. People are important here. And if you had the right people, this eviction moratorium didn't hurt you. If you bought your first property last year, it was your very first time, and you got lucky and you got the right person the first time, you're like, yeah, big deal. What's the big deal about this eviction moratorium? But if you bought a fourplex and you moved in the first 4 people that showed you cash, and you're like, great, my first mortgage is paid, you might be sitting there right now going, I no longer want to be a landlord. This is not the business for me. And I get calls like that all the time of people that are just saying, I don't know how you do it. I'm done. Because if you don't do this business the right way, it's gonna cost you a lot of money. But if you do it the right way, it's the best business in the world. Out of all the things I'm teaching my kids in investing, it is real property. It is buying property. And it's hard right now because real estate is expensive and it's hard to find, and you have big money chasing it and you have cash deals. So we're getting really creative in our investing nowadays, but just know that the people in the long-term holds are everything.
Absolutely. I agree. And I'm seeing that this whole presentation has really opened my eyes, and seeing that it's really about the people, about the quality, and in turn, that'll just really, really be a good situation. I do have a question for Heather. This is, I know this might be a little bit, but I'm just curious, what's the most shocking scenario you've experienced in your time working with Rent Perfect?
So I used to be an investigator. I mean, I still am a PI, but I'm more on like training and, you know, things like that now. But when I was a PI, one of the craziest stories that I could tell is we had a guy apply, and he was applying with his dad, and we were doing the research, and we found that the guy was still in prison, and he was trying to use his handicapped brother's identity up, so he was going to be getting released from prison soon. So his dad was applying for these properties, and he was using the handicapped brother's identity for the brother to try and move him in somewhere. So we're like, we had discovered this. We were on the phone with the warden of this prison because we were just really curious at this point. We're like, what is going on here? So, I mean, it usually stems back to some sort of identity theft, really, is what's going on. You know, really looking at, you need to see these people. And I know a lot of people are a big fan of these showings now where you don't have to be there and you get a code and you go. And if that's, you know, we're PIs, so we like seeing people, we like interviewing. David can tell you some stories about that. But at the very least, you need to do a video chat interview, something where you can physically see the person. Because I mean, he was still in prison. He was going to be getting out soon. So he didn't want this murder record on him. So he's using his poor handicapped brother's identity. You know, it was just crazy. I mean, people are so dishonest. You know, you got to see them in person. You really do.
I, as a landlord, was showing a property here in Gilbert, Arizona to somebody, and as we're going through the property, he's telling me how he's a handyman, and man, he's going to fix this up, and by the time he gets done with my property, it's going to be worth so much more money. And I'm so grateful that I found him because he's really going to be an asset to me. Well, as a PI and being in this business a long time, if you have to impress me, there's a big red flag. And so I gave him my criteria and I showed him, but wanted for murder on a warrant out of Illinois. And I explained him my criminal criteria. So he still applies. And so I called the police and I said, let's go back down the property. Let's show him. And the police handcuffed him here and hauled him away.
Wow.
But you know, was really trying to buddy up with me, was really trying to tell me, you know, how fantastic his was, and his wife was missing, and he was so I don't know what ended up happening. I never followed the story, but you know, here I am in the PI. You know, you don't lie to me about your criminal background. I'm going to find you. You know,
Yeah.
people still will. They'll still try to bamboozle me, even though I tell them, listen, I'm an officer of the court. I own an eviction company. I'm a PI. I do backgrounds. They still try to bamboozle me. So I know if they're doing that to me, they're doing it to everybody across the nation, and they're getting away with it for a lot of people. And like, I always love the phone call that says, hey, are you a small landlord or are you a property management company?
Yep.
What
do you always say, David?
Yeah, they're screening you long before you're ever screening them. They want to know, am I going to get away with something, or are you going to treat this like a business? And Heather is great about saying, guys, this is a business. You're finding a business partner. This is not a side gig. This is not a side hobby. This is a business. Take your emotions. Emotions are now gone. Use a criteria. Use a proper screening company. and don't override yourself. Don't override your criteria. Stick with it. It'll keep you out of trouble and it'll keep you safe, because can bad people be nice? Absolutely. You've all watched the TV where they find the serial killer and they go interview the next door neighbor and they say, oh, they got the wrong guy. That's not him. He's so nice. We were just barbecuing together last night. You know, people with bad intentions want something from you. They're going to be nice. So this gut feeling, or they're so nice, or I want to give them a chance, or it's just not worth it at all.
Totally. And that's why Rent Perfect is great. So I had talked about, I'm going to have, my husband and I are moving, we have a new build, and so we're finally going to be renting our home. But, you know, I've helped, you know, thousands of people with their rentals, close friends, family. So, I mean, I feel like I have experience, but now I'm really going to have experience. Like, I'm going to walk the walk pretty soon here. But you need something like Rent Perfect. This is why it's great, especially if you're going to self-manage. You know, if you have a property management company, that's great. But, you know, some people want to take a swing at self-managing, and it's totally doable. You just need you need a professional policies and procedures. You need this rental criteria, because people are screening you. They want to find a landlord that doesn't know what they're doing. They want to find someone that they can take advantage of. And you don't want that to be you. You want to have the confidence. This is your property. You know what you're doing. They can't mess with you. You know, I always hear David saying this, because people try and talk me out of renting our house right now. Like my mortgage lady, like, are you sure you want to rent? You know, I've heard so many horror stories, and I'm like, look, I work for, you know, AAA landlord, Rent Perfect. My boss is an officer of the court. I'll evict them if I have to. But it's really just about who you get in there. So that's, you know, what I feel confident. I'm excited. You know, everyone is a risk, but
You made me feel confident in an hour.
You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. This is my criteria. Don't mess with me. You got to pay your rent. You know, so I don't know. That's just how I approach it.
We don't have much longer here, but let me tell you how I onboard someone real quick. It's so easy, guys, because I built this for me, and I always said, hey, listen, if this helps me just manage my properties and no one else uses Rent Perfect, then it'll benefit me. But let me tell you how I do it. So I go, and like Heather said, I don't like kind of the codes or the boxes where they're my properties without me. I go meet everybody at the property. And I'm asking them a lot of questions. I'm having a lot of conversation with them. I don't really care what the answer is, because they're going to qualify based on my criteria, not how they answer my questions out on the property. But it lets me know a little bit about them, and it helps me catch them if they're lying to me in certain things.
Just like small talk, right? Is that what
just small talk? I'm just small talking with them, and you know, like I had about a year ago, I had these two girls come to one of my condos, and the one was asking me so many questions that wasn't applying and wasn't going to live there, but she was like measuring the drapes, and like you could tell she had a lot of interest in this property, and you know. And so I said, well, who's moving in? And, oh, just her. Well, where are you going to live? And, oh, anyways, she had a criminal history, and she was going to be an unauthorized resident living in there along with the person that could qualify for it. But what I usually do is I show them the property, and I usually, a lot of times they'll come out and say, hey, I'll take it. I want it right now. I'm like, you know what? Just take some time, think about it. I won't offer it to anybody else. I kind of slow play them. And I'm like, don't rush into anything here. I want to make sure you really want this. And they'll be, yeah, I really want this. Or they'll call me 10 minutes later or 15 minutes later and say, I want it. I then simply log into my Rent Perfect. I get their email address and their cell phone number, which usually I already have their cell phone number. I get their email address, and I send them off an invite to apply online. And so they apply online. But here's the cool thing, if you can follow me on this one. I'm not actually running their background check, and I'm not actually running their credit as a landlord. They're running their own credit. They're running their own background check. They're paying for it, and they're doing business with Rent Perfect. And they're calling Heather if they have questions, and then they push a button that shares all that information back with me, where they're actually sharing the information they've already pulled. So they can see their information, they see their credit bureau, they see their criminal history, and they share it back with me. That way, all the regulation goes out the door of me running a background check on them. If they ever said, you ran a background check on me and you didn't have my permission, I would say, I never ran a background check on you. You shared it with me. So that takes all that regulation away. Plus they pay for it, making it free on me. So if I'm out to lunch or whatever, I look at my phone, it says, hey, they've applied. I get an instant credit score, credit bureau, application. I get an instant criminal. That's not the final criminal, but I get an instant criminal, I get the address. And I can look at that thing within 5 minutes and say, okay, we're well on our way. I don't have to worry about, you know, keep putting it out on Zillow, keep meeting with people. I can tell whether we're on our way or whether there's going to be concerns right away. And then I let that 4 to 6 hours go by, and then I get an email saying, hey, I'm so-and-so investigator assigned to your file. I've looked it over. Here's your final report. And then if I like them and everything looks good and they pass my criteria, I push my lease wizard and I fill out how much is rent, when's the start of the lease, when's the end of the lease. If there's anything that deals that I made them that I'll do this or I'll do that. Or like some of my properties, I pay the utilities up to $100, and over $100 you pay the rest of the utility if you want to leave the doors open and the air conditioning's running. But then I can put in any kind of special deal I made with them in this lease, review the lease, and push another button, send it off to them. They can digitally sign it, come back to me with the lease signed. I then require them to get renter's insurance. They can buy it through Rent Perfect, or they can upload their own certificate. I then send out a move in and move out inspection. And ultimately, what I really love is one of my favorite things is I set up the rent pay where it comes right out of their bank account and comes in right into my bank account. They can set that up on a schedule every month. I just get the rent that's coming right into my bank account. No more waiting for the mail, no more stopping by their house, them stopping by my house, them giving out my bank account, stopping by the bank and paying a partial payment. The rent pay at the very end is fantastic. I love it. It saves me. In fact, sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I look at my app and I'm like, everybody's paid rent because I haven't got any kind of late notices from everybody. And it almost puts my rentals on such an easy autopilot that it's almost too easy. But I have to keep checking all of my stuff because it's all working so well. I almost forget about it. When the first comes, my money's all in my bank account already. So it's a whole platform that'll help you onboard someone and then manage them all the way to the end. And then in the very end, when they leave, there's a move out inspection. You go through, you take pictures. It compares the move in pictures and the move out pictures to show what the shape of the property when they moved in and the shape of the property when they moved out. So Rent Perfect has changed my life. Obviously I founded it and I own it. But it makes it so easy for me to run 14 properties and then multiple companies on the side. I'm not a full-time landlord. I'm not doing this as a full-time business. This is a side job for me, and Rent Perfect is the only way I can do it and not have a property management company.
Love that.
Pretty sweet.
Well, I know we're finishing up right now. Do you both have a little bit, like a couple more minutes to answer a couple of questions really quick? Or
Absolutely.
okay, let's fire through it. So Ruth is asking if you both know the new regulations that are here in Florida.
Fill me in on what they are.
Yeah, we need to get with her to ask that.
Okay.
Let's see what JP said. He said, will a police background check capture all these criteria you spoke about?
Well, first of all, a police background check is going to be a fingerprint background check, and most states will not allow you to do a fingerprint background check unless you're applying for some kind of license or do something. So most people don't have access to a police background check. If you do go down to the police station, they will run a background check through their police station for you, but they don't run a background check nationwide for you. So you can go to your local city, say, hey, tell me if there's any arrest records for this person, and they'll give you a list of arrest records. But the police don't monitor what the court does. The police just file the charges, and it goes to the prosecutors, and then the prosecutors go ahead and do the case, and they can tell if they're guilty or not guilty. We go over to the courts. We grab all of our information from the courts. We really don't care about the police station because a lot of people are charged with the crime and then it never follows through in the court. So I would get all my data from the court. That's where we get our data from.
Yeah, the court.
Okay. The list of criteria should, this is a question from Ruth. The list of criteria should be signed by prospective tenant before or with the contract to lease?
I sign it before they even apply. So that way, when we come back with the backgrounds and they didn't pass, we can say, well, we gave you what it took to pass and you said, yes, I can pass all this, and you didn't pass. It makes it really easy for me to deny them, to say, I'm so sorry, your income ratios didn't match, and that's the reason we're declining. It's not that I don't like you, it's not that anything else, it's just keeps it all business. And so I would have them sign it before they apply. Has nothing to do with the lease.
Okay. So I'm pretty sure you mentioned this. It says, you didn't mention the fee, but what is the fee for your screening company? What is the fee for your screening, and how long does it take to send it back to us, for the results to be sent back to us? So I know that a personal investigator gets assigned to each one, and then you bring more results. So I guess all in all.
So this is crazy, but on your screen right now, 95 cents sets you up an account if you're a RIA member. That's a one-time fee that sets up your account. Okay, think of it like an app fee. After that, your tenants are going to pay for their own screening. So they're going to pay us $35 directly to us, because remember, they're ordering their own criminal and credit, and they're paying us, and we're giving it to them, and then they're sharing it with you. The only cost after the 95 cents where you get a setup with us is if you want to use our rent pay system, it is $10 a month to use our rent pay. And that doesn't even go to us. That goes right to the processor of the ACH. And that's just the cost it takes for us to transfer money from one bank account to another. And so that's $10 a month. If you have just one LLC or one proprietary bank account, you can do unlimited transactions, unlimited properties, all for that $10 a month.
Gosh, the value.
It's cheap. It's totally cheap.
Yeah, so they pay that screening fee, and then you can do the lease, the move in and move out inspections, which are so cool, so convenient. I mean, I know that a lot of landlords have a move-in inspection form, but it's such a pain. Like, I remember years ago when I was renting, they'd give me this piece of paper, and I'm like, I'm supposed to take my own pictures. Where do I keep the pictures? Like, organizing everything. So, I mean, it just makes it easy. It sends reminders. They take the pictures in the app. Everything's stored, the report saved. So it just kind of organizes it for you. And you have this little professional system that just makes you look, it just gives you that professional touch that you really need now. So to help people not try and take advantage of you. I mean, it really does give that to you, because you have this professional system with this professional lease and application, and it's your application. You can customize the application, add your own questions. We start you out with an application that has standard questions, but then you can add to it. The lease is your lease. So we start you with a standard lease that's designed so you can customize that. You can delete sections, add sections of your own for your area. So it really is just this custom platform that most of it's free to you. And then that rent pay is just really worth it, especially if you have more than one property. So you're not tracking down rent from multiple tenants each month. So it is a really good value.
Alexa, also, you don't have to use everything. You can use the rent pay by itself. You can use the background check. You can use the lease. You don't have to use all of it. So if you have something that you really love that you do, then don't use ours. Don't use that procedure that we offer. So at Rent Perfect, we believe that we're not going to tell you how to manage your property. You tell us how you want to manage your property. So you can all everything. Yeah, everything that you use. We know that every landlord is not the same.
True.
Yeah, it's your criteria, your application. This is just it's your account. So we're not going to tell you who to approve. We're not going to tell you any of that. So
amazing. Well, I have one last question from Julio. It says, how do you handle a tenant that is paying late but is paying? ? Do you charge them late fees or interest legally?
So check with your local attorneys on what you can charge as far as your late fees and your interest in Florida. I don't know that specifically, but this is what I know about tenant behavior. If you let them get away with it once, they will get away with it 2 times, 3 times, and 4 times. So if you like to continue to manage what I call the hard way and manage like that, That's up to you. I choose not to manage like that. I have too much going on to be always worrying about when I'm going to get the next paycheck from you. Is it coming this Friday, on Monday? When's your payday? And I know too much about your life at that point. I've dealt with it this time because the federal government has put the eviction moratorium in there and it has made me manage like that. But I've sat that tenant down and I've said, once this eviction moratorium is done, we're going back to the old way we're doing business. And that is rent is due on the 1st. I have a 5-day grace period. At 5 days, there's a $50 charge, and then there's a $10 charge day in late fees. So go borrow from your church, your family, your friends, get on track, because I don't want to manage like that anymore. That is me personally, Julio. If you're getting the money, congratulations, but you're working harder than you need to. And there are so many good tenants in the tenant pool right now that you can find that will absolutely have your money to you 5 days before rent is due, and they'll put it on an automatic payment, and you'll never have to worry about that again. So really, I'm going to say the answer is yours to answer, whatever you're willing to put up with.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. I just want to congratulate our winner for the membership this year for 1 year. It's Elizabeth Whaley Brainy. Congratulations. I will be emailing you shortly. Thank you so much, David and Heather. I learned so much today. I know our members and everyone in our audience today learned a lot as well. Once again, I put their information in the chat. They have all of their platforms that you should definitely get connected into. And I just want to thank you so much on behalf of us here at BRIA and all of our audience here. It was incredible. I learned so much. I loved it.
So Alexa, how can they get the discount link? Do you have that on your website, or is that something I should send you?
I threw it in the chat. We have it on our website on our member portal, but I did throw it in the chat. I did click it and play around a little bit. If anyone has any questions, please send me an email. I will put my email in the chat as well. And if I can't answer your question, then I will reach out to David and Heather who can.
Yeah, reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. I know our system very well, so I'm happy to answer questions, help you get your account set up. I mean, it's simple to create your account. That can take, a minute or two. You can log right in, but then you want to get your rental criteria set up, your application. If you're, so I'm excited to speak with some of you. I'm happy to help.
Yes.
Thanks, Alexa. Thanks, Anish.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everybody. And you can always call our office if you need anything or have any questions. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.